What's going on, guys? Welcome back to Voice of the Valleys yet again with your host and friendly neighborhood far-right thug, Mr. George Cresswell. Hope we're all doing well. Hope we're all having a fantastic morning, afternoon, evening, night, wherever we are. So, got another few things I want to go on. I'm recording this straight after the one that I just recorded and would have been released. I believe it's episode 17. We covered a lot of things. It's literally just escaped my memory now because I was trying to get everything ready for this episode. Covered a lot to do with like the Lib Dems' recent position on Pride, how the UK has fallen massively, the after effects and main effects of migration and some of the historical context around what's going on from a clip that was either in Austria or Germany. There's different accounts of where this clip was from, of a young girl, two young girls rather, but a young girl being massively harassed, and the comments being given at the time via a group of Syrian men where "I've got you a gift, she's yours, take her to Raqqa," Raqqa being the ISIS stronghold, and where a lot of sorry, just checking my phone a minute, guys. I had an important text come through. But yeah, Raqqa being the ISIS stronghold, and where thousands of Christian and Yazidi women were sexually enslaved and still are to this day, all up and down the Middle East, where these terror groups have taken hold. Really questioning why these Syrians are still here. And why they are not enjoying living it up in their new Islamic paradise that has been created. But if you've been paying attention recently, I had a conversation very recently with Mrs. Victoria Rickson, whistleblower in the NHS, particularly in the midwifery field. And we had a really great conversation. One thing I wanted to bring two things up, ladies and gentlemen, because I asked the question in this clip. Basically, is the NHS, in terms of the way that the system is overall manifesting, in terms of its quality of healthcare and how it's been politicised and such, is it healthcare? Or is it La Cosa Nostra? So this is a extract from a clip which I took from that podcast, which you can go and listen to now. It's on YouTube, it's on Spotify, it's on Rumble, wherever you're listening or watching this. And I think this is from fairly late on in the interview. It's from like an hour plus. And I'll give you the context now of how I came to this type of title, for example, and why. And I'll give you a little bit of time to hear Victoria's answer about how she thinks about these things. And then there's one more part of this podcast that part of this clip really left Victoria in kind of like a mild horror when I told her about one thing that was going on when we were in school and stuff like that. If you've listened to the episode, you'll already know more about that. So anyway, point being, ladies and gentlemen, this is why I asked the question. First off, and this relates to an article which we're going to be looking at as well, article titled "Manslaughter Case Launched into Nottingham Baby Deaths," is, put it back up, is the NHS a healthcare entity or a mafia entity? What seems to be going on, and why I want to ask you, like, whether it's the UN, whether it's these other agendas that are at play, or these organizations that are at play. The way I sort of see it, I don't know if you've ever seen the documentary on Netflix known as Fear City. It's about the mob in New York in the 80s and how they took them down, and they were giving this visual about how the mob is set up. So you have like the soldiers that are underneath these the captains, and then you have the captains that report to the underboss, and then you have the boss at the top. So you have this very hierarchical structure within the family, and sort of drew me a parallel between that. You sort of have like the midwives that are operating. I'm not comparing midwives directly to mafia soldiers, by the way. I want to make that perfect. George. I want to make that perfectly clear. I'm not directly comparing the two, but you have I'm very glad she wasn't offended. It would have been very awkward if she was. What I'm getting at here, ladies and gentlemen, is that the way the Colombo, Gambino, Lucchese families in New York, they were the main mafia families in the 80s, obviously. The way they're structured is you have all the soldiers, which are the foot soldiers. They're the ones that go out and do the bidding, right? They go out and commit the criminal acts themselves, whether it's a robbery, whether it's a murder, okay, in many instances, whether it is burning a place for insurance, whatever it is, right? They're the ones that go out and do it. then they report whatever they steal, whatever they do, they report to a captain, also known as a capo. Okay, so they're known as a capo or a captain. And they basically, as Michael Franzese would say, for example, so Michael Franzese was a capo in the Colombo crime family. And his father, Sonny Franzese, was a very famous mobster as well. At one point, he was the underboss. And basically, as a street boss, a capo is basically a street boss. So they are overseeing a number of lower level guys. They're not somebody that can really give the go ahead if the mafia was to go and assassinate somebody or hit somebody, if they were known. But they would basically take their cut from the guys that were underneath them, and then also give some back to the boss as well. So the mob is a prime example of something like a big, massive pyramid scheme as far as money is concerned. Okay, all the money goes up, okay? You get some status, you get more leeway to do some sort of things. Like, for example, if people knew you were a made guy, i.e. part of one of the crime families in New York, then obviously people wouldn't be able to touch you. If somebody, God forbid, hit you or disrespected you, you could potentially lose your life for it, especially if you weren't a made guy. But in terms of that, all the money goes up. So all the money goes up to then one level above the captains is the underboss. Now, the underboss is obviously one below the boss himself. And if the captains have a problem, then they'll typically report to the underboss. You typically don't go directly to the boss. Typically, if a lower level guy, either like a captain or a soldier, has to meet the boss, typically it'll be because the boss is sent for him. And then obviously above him, you have what's known as a consigliere or consiglieri as well, which is more of like an advisor to the boss and like a mediator between the underboss, the boss, and the lower level guys, the captains and the soldiers underneath them. Finally, then you have the boss at the top. The boss is the shot caller, makes all the shots, decide who lives, who dies, gets the majority of the money from the street. Paul Castellano at the height of his wealth. Obviously, it's massively different back then. Paul Castellano was assassinated in 1985. Yeah, December 16th, 1985, I believe. Or it's either 1985 or 1986. I'm just going to double check that 2 seconds, ladies and gentlemen, just to make sure. It's either 1985 or 1986. It was 1985. It was 1985. Should have gone with my gut. So in 1985, Paul Castellano was assassinated. He had a massive net worth when he died from all his rackets and stuff like that. So that's the structure, basically. That's what I'm getting at here. There's a long-winded way of explaining the structure of the families themselves. But I was thinking that because, let's get into it in a moment, there's a lot of parallels between how really any organization is structured. But when you look at how like politicized the NHS has become with regards to the trans agenda, with regards to Islam and how little people have to speak out against it and how they're ostracized in many instances, such as Victoria's, they are threatened with death. They are low-key threatened with death for whistleblowing and stuff like that. You really do get the impression that this is very mob-like and very criminal-like. And that's what I wanted to ask Victoria about. So let's quickly get on to her response.
Anything you say, don't worry.
There you go. You had the midwives that sort of carry out the bidding of the captains, which I liken to the managers in this instance, just carrying out, the orders that they're told to. And then you're obviously going to have something at the top. Do we have like any idea on what that sort of is, or am I really digging deep into conspiracy theories here?
No, I think when you follow the money, when you start looking at the money and you start looking at your country and you start looking at the history of your country, and then you look, let's take the NHS, for instance. It was born in 1947. And back then, and let's just particularly focus on maternity. Back then, every woman delivered at home, pretty much, with a doctor's support if needed. Between 1947 and 1970s, it tipped and everybody delivered in hospital very quickly. Now, when people say, "Oh, so many people died," yeah, but who's given us our data? The people that run the world. So now I question everything and I say, well, if we've only ever had stillbirth data from one entity and that's the NHS, how do we know it's accurate? How do we not know that the stillbirth data has projected a poor model of care into making money? So people argue with me, oh, the stillbirth rate was 30%. Well, how do you know? Well, the NHS told me. What, you trust the NHS that's just put a jab in you that can kill you and give you myocarditis and drop dead with white clots? Hello. You know, this is my argument now. I'm like, I think we all have to sit on the fence now and start thinking, well, and make our own decisions. So when I think about...
Yeah. So I think a certain level of scrutiny is certainly warranted, which is probably get into the next part of this clip. A certain level of scrutiny is definitely warranted, especially where we get our information from and how far back the corruption and rot goes. I'm not saying that this is meant to completely overhaul the way that we do things, obviously the way that we've done things before. You could criticize if you wanted to, you know, if things were sanitary, you know, all things like that. But certainly, especially around that time, you know, we certainly didn't have the collapsing birth rate problem that we do now. So that problem, again, speaks to wider things like how our culture has changed, how our view on things like childbirth and, you know, gender roles, so to speak, has changed. And the rise of feminism has simply resulted in a war on the family that currently the family is in the midst of recovering from, but it's certainly levied a massive assault against the family via changing people's attitudes and perceptions of what their duties are. Namely, it's taken women and given them the outlook. It's given them the outlook and given them the responsibility and charge in their own minds with being men and trying to outdo men and trying to do all of these things in order to get back at the evil, oppressive man. It's taken women in particular and turned them against men by making them think that they always have to be competing with men. And that was never the way that it was before. It was never the way that it was intended to be, but that's the way that it is currently. Again, how far back does this go? How many lies have we been told? I think it's okay to ask that question until we get the right answer, unless we've already been given the right answer. But I think people should be allowed to ask those questions, for sure. Especially with how politicized we've seen the NHS become in the modern day. So trying to get people to do these diversity, equity and inclusion courses, the amount of money they spend on diversity, equity, inclusion officers, all of these things, how politicized it's become. Again, makes you wonder how much data are they obfuscating and stuff like that. Is the stillbirth information accurate? You know, we were lied to about the vaccine and myocarditis and blood clots and all of these things. So what else are they lying about? It's a valid question to have. It is a valid question to have, even if it is one of these instances where we have actually been given the right answer. And by questioning it, we're not doing anything wrong, but we're questioning it to make sure that that answer is the right answer and that there's nothing else being hidden from us. I think that's perfectly fine. I think that's perfectly fine. I think that's why, for example, for all the people that I follow on social media, for example, on my other account to do personal training and stuff like that, that are having absolute hissy fits because of what RFK is doing in the White House at the moment. I'm like, well, look, the way that we've been doing things recently has led to really, really not good outcomes. And the problem seems to only be getting worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. Maybe let's try something different. Makes you wonder if a lot of these people don't want to try something different because they know what will happen and they're scared of that being exposed. I'm not saying that RFK Jr. is God or anything like that. I'm not even saying that what he says is completely accurate. For I've seen he has a lot of very contrarian and very pseudoscientific takes, right? But from at this point, you know, with how worsening the obesity crisis is, with all the medical interventions that seem to just be weaponized against us and depopulation narratives that want to cull the population down, I'm like, maybe it's best if you guys don't have the reins at the moment. Maybe let him take over. That's coming from it from a different perspective. So he's becoming from a much more virtuous, religious, he claims to be Catholic, pro-life perspective, which is going to influence a lot of his policy and decision-making, which I think on the whole is going to be pretty good, but we will see.
And I think about that. People that birthed at home cost nothing, but the midwife's time, yeah? You think now there are 600,000 births a year on average. It's dropped, the fertility rates, the birth rates. Half of those women are induced. And just under half of those women have a cesarean section. Now, a cesarean section is around about up to about $8,000, depending if you're private or private's about 10.
So just to double check. So if we got about 600,000 births or so at the moment, if half of those are induced, that means 300,000 people are being induced. And then about 150,000 of those people are having C-sections. Oof, harrowing stuff.
Why would they want you at home? You make money for the system. So when you start looking at it like that and you start thinking, well, why do they want bums in hospital beds? Why do they want birth trapped into the system? And you start looking at the money, you then start looking at your own CEO. You then start looking at who your directors are, and then you start looking at them up on Companies House, and then you start looking at some connection. Where is the money coming from? Then you start looking at where shares are, or you start digging. It's all there. The thing I've learned is if they tell you the truth and you still go ahead and use it, there's no karmic debt to repay. They've told you, and you still got on the bandwagon and had a baby in a hospital. That's how I see it, right?
Very good point.
So when you...
Very, very good point. So, as you're saying, very, very good points there, especially with the point about being like, yeah, if you get told this stuff and you go along with it, yeah, it's a bit like, you know, people who get scammed in a way, they had to have a certain degree of complicity of it if they were ignorant of the scam, or if they were told the risks by a friend, like, oh, this person's a scamster, and they still went in thinking that they could do the system better or something like, oh, they could beat them. Like the classic 3-card Monty scam, right? Not only is everybody cotton on to that scam now, but if somebody tells you that, look, this person's a scam artist, you'll lose money, he will steal your money because he uses sleight of hand and stuff like that, and you still go in there and you lose your money, then there's nobody to hold to account really but yourself. Yes, he shouldn't be scamming you, but you still went along with it. It's a little bit like the casino mentality, where people who are aware of this information and know what's going on because they've been warned about it, and still go ahead and do it anyway, well, at some point you have to take responsibility. Obviously, you have to take responsibility and understand that you're responsible for your own actions, obviously. And if you went into it knowing the risks, knowing what could happen, and that thing does happen, well, again, who do you have to blame but yourself, right? I think that's what a lot of people are sort of cottoning onto now and actually putting a bit more focus on, is how they react to things and they interpret things. A lot of it just swallow everything they're told by the BBC and the mainstream media, hook, line and sinker, and don't question it at all. But more and more people are questioning it now, which is good to see. Especially things like digital ID and the immigration narratives that we've been sold down the river with, okay? So like immigration, diversity is our strength, multiculturalism, all of this stuff. And Tony Blair came out allegedly a good couple of months ago and said that, to make it easier to track things like criminals and crime and stuff like that, we need to bring in digital ID. And Tony Blair being one of the most evil people, evil geniuses of our recent generation, one of the worst British prime ministers we've ever had, and knew that this was all a cover simply to bring in digital ID anyway. The point that I was making with Victoria, for example, is that they were grooming this to us in school in year 7. So in year 7 in Wales and England, typically you'll be around 10 years old, thereabouts. Some people are obviously born a little bit earlier. They'll spend most of that year in like 11 in terms of their age bracket, but you're 10 to 11 years old, basically. And they brought in this system, which I'll tell Victoria about now. I just want to go over this clip so she can, because again, her reaction is priceless to see this, right? So you never would have thought of. But there was this little box in the school canteen, which you'd put cash money into. So the school came out and said that they're no longer taking cash in the canteen. So you had to put money into this box, which was on the wall by the entrance to the canteen. And it had a keypad on the front of it, if I remember correctly, but that wasn't really used so much. I think it was to open the machine and take the money out. But it was basically like a mini bank, basically. You put the money in, it would take your money, you would take it back. And they would be linked to your fingerprint. So you had to have your fingerprint set up. It was called the cashless system. This goes back to 2010, by the way. So they were grooming this into us back in 2010. And obviously being 10 years old, you're not supposed to know the details of why they're bringing this in. You're not supposed to even be concerned with that. You're not supposed to be able to see that. You're supposed to be concerned with, having fun on the playground and just trying to get through school without getting in too much trouble and do the best you can, right? Especially in public schools, they don't really teach you much anyway. They just indoctrinate you into shit. So they brought the system in, and it was the only way to pay for things in the canteen. It was the only way to buy food. And already you should be seeing the similarities between this and the China system. So then when you went up and you got your food from the canteen, you then had to place your fingerprint on the sensor by the desk. The dinner lady would be there. And then that would be how you pay for it. And it would be paid for it out of the balance which you had from the money which you put into the machine. So if you put £10 in, you had £10 with which to buy your food. If it cost you £5.50, you then have £4.50 left over, so on. Just basic transaction in that. But just showing you again, why are they taking the cash out of it? A 10-year-old kid's not going to think about that. A 10-year-old kid's just going to do what the school tells them to do, for the most part. But it means if they're going to buy food, they're going to go along with the system because every kid needs food. Every kid needs food. But again, look at how that's translated to contactless systems. Look at how that's translated in particular to the system you have in China, where all you have to do is imagine that system in the canteen linked to political opinions, and then you can't buy food, you can't buy a house, you can't pay rent, all of this stuff. You can't even go certain places. And then you see how that system was going to be weaponized and how dangerous it was to have us groomed into that ideology and groomed into that system from so young. Here's me talking about that, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, this is fine. I'm like, I look back in horror now, realizing the power and cash transfer that it was, that, you know, whether it be we're talking about digital ID, cashless society they were trying to groom us into when we were in school and stuff like that. They started bringing the system in then, and that's where again I go back
not when
and
I
think
was
now,
at
it's
school,
like,
George. Remember, 42. So I'm a lot older than you, steady.
no, but it was a thing. They brought it in when we were in school. It would be a little thing on the wall, and it would be linked to your fingerprint. You'd have your fingerprint in, you put your money in, and then you pay with your fingerprint. So yeah, you'd have this balance which would come up to your screen. It'd be linked to your fingerprint. This was when I was in year 7. So I would have been, this started coming in when I was in year 7. And then soon, you know, you can just imagine that. You've only got to think that. Well, imagine that money system there, which the minute you hand over that cash, you don't have that money anymore. No. Imagine then that is linked to your political opinions. And then all of a sudden, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out how you end up with a system like communist China. It instantly it becomes apparent, and instantly it becomes apparent how the Labour government in this country tried to bring that in. And once you mentioned it before, once you see it, you can't unsee it.
No. And would you go back? Would you go back to unseeing it?
Absolutely not.
No,
absolutely not. As harrowing as it is, because ultimately it's the classic illustration of the emu that digs its head in the sand. You know what I mean? It's like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you dig your head into the sand. Whatever's going to be coming is going to come in. Yeah. And I hate using this term, but that it almost like is getting unplugged from the Matrix in a way. The Matrix in a way is very prophetic in this way. I don't agree with necessarily. And that's why I got to say, I don't agree with everybody that uses that term. My dog's just decided to go absolutely nuts and do a big balk on the settee. So anyway, that was a key point there as well, is that not digging the head in the sand. You'd be surprised how many people want to go back to like living in a state of ignorant bliss. Many people still try to convince themselves that there's no problem, and that's where again the problems end up getting worse and worse and worse. So why we call these people useful idiots, because they continually push their head into the sand and won't accept the realities of what's going on. Whether it be digital ID, whether it be immigration, whether it be the healthcare system, whether it be the tax system, whether it be, again, economically, whether it be the downfall of the family, the destruction of the family, I should say. Not the downfall. The family was going strong until we decided that we wanted to destroy it. Truly, truly harrowing stuff. But I want you to see Victoria's reaction there. Like, again, Victoria didn't know that this stuff was being brought in schools when we were in school. And obviously she would have had... I think she said she had the first child at 20. So again, it would have been around the same time as her. At least one or two of her young children were in school that this was being brought in. As far as I know, this is not unique to Wales either. My school, as far as I know, was one of many. You know, obviously I don't have that data to hand about back in 2010 when they were bringing this system in. I can only speak from my one brief limited experience. But again, you've only got to see how that system then can be weaponized against you because of your political opinions, because of your religion, because of your skin color, even just arbitrarily, like the case in China, for example, where some workers, I believe, were trying to get out of, or some people were trying to get out of their 15-minute city. And I can't remember if it was due to COVID being the reason, but what they got to do in China, they got to show QR codes to go everywhere. They got to show QR codes to go everywhere in order to get in and out of turnstiles that monitor where they are, you know, 24/7. They've got CCTV cameras that can tell who you are just by the gait, the way you walk. And what happened was they were trying to get on this train, and next thing you know, they showed that somebody's recording them, and they're showing their phones to the camera, and their phone screens, because obviously it's limited, you can't really see it because of the detail. They've all just turned red. They've all just turned red, and that's just saying that the Chinese government has just pressed the button and just said, you can't go anywhere now. For whatever reason we say, we press that button, you can't go anywhere. Yeah, people will look at that and say that it's the model for the future and it's a free society. And it makes you wonder. I saw a post the other day saying that Christianity was the fastest growing religion in China. I'm like, yeah, because they're trying to turn to God because they want some sense of bloody freedom and knowing that there's bloody good things to look forward to in the future. That's why they're turning to God, let me tell you. That's why they're turning to Christ. Anyway, so that was from my interview with Victoria, but then she shared this the other day as well. This was published 2 days ago. It's from Ground News. Manslaughter case launched into Nottingham baby deaths. Now, part of the conversation me and Victoria had was about that hospitals were covering up baby deaths. Now, I'm not saying that this hospital directly is. She couldn't actually name the hospital. We never named the hospital in that interview. It was a hospital in England. That was what she was able to say. But there was a hospital in England that I was not privy to what hospital this was, but apparently they've been covering up baby deaths, and that journalists at BBC and Sky News have been sitting on this information for a long time, not doing anything about it. Here we have Brown News. Ground News, for example, is one of the advertisement banners is a brown up here, so that's why I got confused. But Ground News. Little summary for you, ladies and gentlemen. In September 2023, Nottinghamshire Police began investigating Nottingham University Hospital's NHS Trust for possible corporate manslaughter in connection with deaths and serious injuries linked to maternity care. The investigation follows long-standing conditions about severe harm caused by gross negligence in the Trust's management of maternity services before these deaths occurred. The Trust is undergoing an unprecedented NHS maternity investigation overseen by ex-senior midwife Donna Ockenden, which is reviewing over 2,000 cases involving deaths and injuries to evaluate care at Nottingham's maternity services. Dr. Jack and Sarah Hawkins, former employees of the Trust whose daughter Harriet passed away in 2016, described the lasting and severe impact the experience has had on their lives, and emphasised that the investigation represents one step forward to achieving accountability. Whilst corporate manslaughter prosecution targets the Trust, families and campaigners stress it does not address individual accountability, underscoring a continued fight for justice amid family trauma. So, for example, I like that Ground News as well shows you the bias report. So, for example, we have an article relating to this from Channel 4. Nottinghamshire University's NHS Trust investigated for corporate manslaughter. Important to know that Channel 4 has a tendency to lean left. Nottinghamshire Police are investigating an NHS Trust for corporate manslaughter following deaths and serious injuries related to its maternity care. The Nottingham University Hospitals Trust is already the subject of an inquiry examining more than 2,000 cases. And the Telegraph, for example, also reports on it. Nottingham NHS Trust faces corporate manslaughter investigation over baby deaths. So as you noticed there, for example, it was only the Telegraph, and again, it shows you the ideological bias and how they report different things depending on if they want the point to be more accentuated or they want to obscure the point a little bit more. Channel 4 did, because it's a left-leaning publication, did not mention anything to do with baby deaths. Did not mention anything to do with baby deaths. It just said serious injuries related to its maternity care. So it's only implying babies, again, or implying babies, making that reference by implication. It's not outright saying it. The Telegraph comes out and just outright says it over baby deaths. The Trust is also subject of a review into more than 2,000 experiences of maternity care, including fatalities and injuries. So a lot of the publications that are reporting on this seem to be more right-leaning than left-leaning, some in the centre as well. So that's quite interesting. Quite interesting that by the bias comparison, and here you go, Ground News actually summarised it quite well. Left-leaning coverage frames the university hospital's NHS Trust as a scandal hit, quote-unquote, institution, emphasising the, quote, unimaginable and repeated trauma endured by families and demanding the individual accountability beyond the corporate manslaughter probe. In contrast, right-leaning headlines, while absent here, typically de-emphasise systemic trauma, instead highlighting scale and individual failings with emotionally charged phrases such as deaths of hundreds of babies, aligning with a sceptical stance towards public services. So again, the really nice feature of Ground News here to show you the bias distribution. So most of the outlets reporting on this have been quote unquote in the center. I don't know if I would call BBC News as a center publication. Don't know if I would call Sky News as a center publication either. But these are the publications that are in the middle. You have the Independent, Channel 4, Perspective Media that are on the left. Then you have the Sun, the Telegraph, and ITV. Again, questionable how they've got these bias distributions here. But it's good to see that a manslaughter case has been launched, and hopefully we do get the truth on this matter. So if hospitals have been covering up baby deaths, that is something people definitely need to know. Important interview coming up as well, by the way, with another whistleblower on malpractice within hospitals. Please stay tuned for that, ladies and gentlemen. That will be coming very, very soon. So anyway, sorry, Liz, I was just checking out one of the comments on a post that I shared that was particularly spicy and went a little bit viral, I think, judging by the reactions to it. Not bad for an account with about 350 followers or something like that. I'll just have a quick check on the follower account on X. 400 now. It's up over 400 now. Nice. So again, very divisive. Point. And I think I might actually go and show you the post in a little bit and rectify something I wanted to say with it. Anyway, big news that's been making it recently. So Jim Ferguson has been reporting, as of the 1st of June, the war in Ukraine and Russia has apparently taken a massive escalation. And this could be one of two ways that you could sort of view it. And for me, being somebody that is very skeptical of any initiatives to do with foreign aid at the moment, really in regards to anywhere, with the state of the country that we have, and that we always have money to send to foreign countries, but not anything to do with the problems in our own. Looking at it two ways. If it is a success for Ukraine in repelling the Russian invasion and striking back against the injustice that was done to them, that's a massive thing. We should be happy with that. Okay, as people, we should be happy with that. We should remember that Russia's not good guys by any stretch of the imagination. I think, again, a lot of these wars, because you've got to take into account the proxy element of it, because there's so many people above pulling the strings on innocent people's lives. It's hard to define a good guy and a bad guy in a war nowadays. It's hard to have a clear-cut good guy and a bad guy, unless you're dealing with like the war with the southern border in the US, where you had the border that's just open for invasion, and you have cartels on the one side and you have the United States on the other. Okay, clear-cut good guy and bad guy, in my opinion. But the war has just escalated after a massive Ukrainian assault on Russian territory, and Russia is now apparently retaliating, and has said that big retaliation is inevitable, as it would be from their perspective. Okay, we would expect the same for us, except we would cow down to the people that do us damage in our instance. Russian Iskander missile. So I'm reporting this in the order that Jim released the posts. Okay, I think I might have missed one or two, because, for example, I want to see if I can find the first post where he showed the... So, for example, we have this post, okay, ladies and gentlemen. So this post is one of the ones. So Ukraine launched a massive drone offensive. That was the offensive that they launched. So Ukrainian drones were reported overhead, for example, in Voronezh. I think that's how you say it. And this is a video of Russian air defense systems lighting up the sky over Voronezh. Locals have said there's explosions everywhere, sirens nonstop. It's like a war zone. So the war is no longer at Russia's border. This is in their backyard. Ukraine is escalating into deep strikes, and Russia's internal air defenses are being tested. So again, if it's a big success for Ukraine, that's a good thing. And I say that in the context, provided it doesn't have any knock-on effects for us. But sadly, it does appear that it does. So this is the video, for example, of those drones over Voronezh in Russia, for example. Suppose you can't really hear it too much, ladies and gentlemen, but you can hear the cracks of gunfire in the background. But yeah, you can see, if you're looking on screen, you can see the tracer rounds, they're going up. So yeah, very, very scary stuff in some instances, very scary stuff. Especially if you're in that area, especially if you're in that area. But again, that was very, very tame looking. And here we have, for example, a video of the Ukrainians attacking deep into Russia in Lipetsk. So explosions have been reported in Lipetsk as Ukrainian drones penetrate deeper than ever before into Russian territory. There's no warning, just a flash, then chaos. It's unclear what infrastructure may have been hit. Air defenses have been scrambled. And Jim, in fact, Zelensky's regime is escalating into terror strikes. I don't know if I use the term terror in this instance. If it's military structures that have been attacked, I wouldn't call those necessarily terror strikes. But again, Ukraine targeting Russia's interior. The thing that really worries me is that obviously our fingerprints are all over this as well. The Russian X account recently released a statement saying that Russia has no intention to attack Britain or anything like that. But again, people say things all the time. At the end of the day, we have to just worry now what is true, what isn't, and how much of this more are we going to be expected to take before something seriously irreparable happens. I'm not sure why. I'm going to pause that 2 seconds, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not sure why. I don't think it's picking up the audio. Give me 2 seconds. Right, I apologize about that, ladies and gentlemen. I think I've just fixed the sound now. So there we are. So that is the sound of a drone attack in Lipetsk as of June the 1st. So as of June the 1st. Apparently, though, this is the thing that Jim does note. Civilian centers and critical systems are now fair game in Kiev's war playbook. So again, if civilian areas are being attacked, then again, really doesn't bode well for the aggression of the response that will be seen. So we have seen some responses from Russia, for example, ladies and gentlemen. We have seen some of the responses. Give me 2 seconds. I'm just trying to. It won't load it anymore. Apology about myself. Apology about that, ladies and gentlemen. My recording software seems to have wanted to play up massively. So, for example, now one of the escalations that have happened after a massive Ukrainian assault on Russian territory, Moscow has hit back and hard. Russian Iskander missiles are now slamming deep into Ukraine. Explosions reported across multiple regions. This massive escalation. So, for example, I'm not sure exactly where this is from, but this is an example, ladies and gentlemen, of that retaliation that we're allegedly seeing. Well, not allegedly, of course, it is happening. So you can see there, massive cloud. Massive cloud with these missiles coming down. Must be like an apocalypse in this area. This is truly very sad to watch. War is hell. War is hell. It's not just limited to there, though. For example, we also have the Russians have attacked the Odessa port. So a Shahed 136 kamikaze drone has slammed into critical Ukrainian port in Odessa. Explosions have been reported. Infrastructure is heavily damaged. Ukraine's food exports, Black Sea access, and vital supply chains now hang in the balance. Russia is targeting Ukraine's economic lifelines. Odessa is no longer just symbolic, it's strategic. The war is entering a new and dangerous phase. And here's that clip for you, ladies and gentlemen. So the Russians have attacked the port in Odessa with a kamikaze drone. And we also saw 2 Russian submarines enter the Black Sea with Caliber missiles loaded, allegedly. So Russian Navy deployed 2 advanced submarines to the Black Sea, each capable of carrying 12 Caliber cruise missiles. Apparently, according to Kremlin insiders, according to Jim Ferguson, this is a pre-positioning for strategic deterrence or something more. Ukrainian ports are now within seconds of strike range. NATO surveillance aircraft are circling overhead. So there was a interesting post from Jim, which I want to find a bit quick, where he mentioned what some of these missiles were capable of. And it's going to be difficult to find because, goddammit, Jim posts a lot. This isn't the right this isn't the right one. Right, so I found a post, ladies and gentlemen. I'm just going to read it for you. So, for example, when we're talking about these missiles, whether it's Caliber, whether it's Satan II, or whether it is something like the RS-28 Sarmat, which is Russia's Satan II, these are the kind of missiles we're dealing with here, for example. So a single strike from this missile could obliterate Manhattan in seconds and plunge the world into a nuclear winter. So, for example, this missile, known as the Satan II, and comparable to the RS-28, I'm not sure where the caliber would fit into this. I'm assuming it's a nuclear missile. 13,000 kilometer range, 15 MIRV warheads. It is enough power to erase cities. It is enough power to erase cities. So, for example, ladies and gentlemen, traveling at 5 miles per second could hit the US in about 18 minutes. And with 10 warheads of about 55 kilotons each, this would be an example that I'm about to show you now of what this could do to a city like New York. So this is an example of what one of these missiles could potentially do. Apologies about that, ladies and gentlemen. So like I was saying, here's an example of what one of these missiles can do.
Have a target area of more than 1,000 square miles and would kill about 5 million.
So yeah, not great.
Or there could be one more powerful nuclear warhead.
Really not great.
20 megatons.
This isn't where it ends.
Travel 10,000 miles.
We have one warhead here of 20 megatons.
As much as a third. If a 20 megaton nuclear warhead attacks New York, it could look like this. A massive nuclear explosion.
So for those of you who are... If I put it on mute a second. For those of you who are listening, not watching, we're looking at casualties potentially, you know, looking at upwards of about 5.5 million. If that second one was to erupt. So for those of you who are listening, not watching, the first one was much more, when it had like the 10 mini warheads or 14 mini warheads, I can't remember exactly how many it was. They were series of smaller explosions, more spread out, as you can imagine. So if you imagine this missile coming down over a city, when the warheads are shot out, or when the warhead's landing, and land in different places, so it's smaller explosions, more spread out. The big 20 megaton nuclear warhead that could have been in this missile was much more centered. It had a much larger mushroom cloud, much bigger explosion. So yeah, we're not just dealing with... This is the biggest thing that people forget when they're trying to hawk for war and all of these things. People who are genuinely ignorant of this kind of stuff, they forget we're not just dealing with party poppers and cap guns here. We're not dealing with party poppers and cap guns. No, we're dealing with potentially nuclear Armageddon. And this is where, for example, Starmer comes in, who has said that in a move that really shows... in Jim's eyes, for example, being Britain first, Britain last, WEF first, we are moving to war-fighting readiness, says PM Keir Starmer, as he outlines his plan to mobilize a nation. Yeah, they're not going to go with this. Make no mistake, they're not going to go with this. Mobilize for who? Mobilize for what? Mobilize for the destruction more of our own nation. It's like I talked about with James Harvey, ladies and gentlemen. This is the biggest thing at the moment when people are hawking for war, is that people are hawking for war across the world where it doesn't personally affect them whilst their own nation is under attack. It's truly, truly mind-blowing. The nation is under invasion. Our nation is under invasion right now, but people want to go war hawk in Ukraine and in the Middle East and all these other places. So what are we doing? What are we doing is the biggest question. So with regards to Ukraine and Russia in particular, we can only hope that this show of force from Ukraine is going to somehow play into the possibility of getting a peace deal. Okay? I think that's kind of wishful thinking. if I'm being perfectly honest, I've seen some people say it, however, that, you know, what makes me laugh is that some people in the comment section are saying so much for Trump saying that Ukraine doesn't have any cards. Look at this. I'm like, first off, Ukraine had the bloody cards. Why haven't they solved this on their own? Why did they need however many $100 billion of US taxpayer money, which they can't account for? Okay, so quite clearly they don't have all the cards that they think they do, and Trump is right when he says that you don't have any cards. But we can only hope that this is going to bring us somehow closer to a peace deal by weakening Russia in some way, and showing that if they were to try and pursue more war, more territorial gains, more of this kind of stuff, that is obviously going to be some very, very drastic consequences because of that. But again, Ukraine's not going to go down without a fight, so to speak, which is admirable. Obviously, it is admirable. But again, there's a lot more at play here as well. And Trump's saying you're gambling with World War III to Zelensky, you're gambling with World War III. But I think, to be honest, that's what a lot of the people above Zelensky and above Keir Starmer and above the others, that's what they want. They want depopulation. They want this kind of stuff. They want us all to be gone. They want a nice, small population that's easy to control. And they're going to be safe. These people are going to be safe. They're going to have their nuclear bunkers, all of this stuff. You can imagine how much food is going to be stocked away on like Air Force One or something like that. You can just imagine it, right? But Starmer's preparing our sons and daughters, me and you, our sons and daughters, for foreign wars that serve global interests. He won't protect your borders. We saw in the clip in the previous episode that we just talked about in Belgium or in Germany, the young girl that was being grossly assaulted by a bunch of Syrian men, right? Not one Syrian man in particular, but there was a group of them that were enjoying it and saying, look, we'll take her to Raqqa, sorry, she's ours, basically saying they're going to treat her as a sex slave. He'll gladly send troops to defend somebody else's border, but he won't defend his own. Again, they wanted the political power, ladies and gentlemen. When Britain crumbles at home, he sharpens a spear for NATO's next disaster. So this is Keir Starmer talking about his response whilst Britain crumbles, ladies and gentlemen.
And today, following through on this review, I want to set out 3 fundamental changes that we're going to deliver. First, we are moving to warfighting readiness as the central purpose of our armed forces. When we are being directly threatened by states with advanced military forces, the most effective way to deter them is to be ready. And frankly, to show them that we're ready, to deliver peace through strength. Now, Britain...
Peace through strength, eh? Ooh, I wonder who coined that term. I wonder who's synonymous with that term. Keir Starmer really cementing his far-right fascist Nazi heel turn with rhetoric like this. Started off with Islander strangers, now talking peace through strength? Well, where is the peace through strength on the grooming gangs? Where is the peace through strength in the mosque that have been popping up all over the place? Where was the peace through strength with Lee Rigby? Where was the peace through strength with the Manchester Arena bombing? I have serious questions. Obviously, Keir Starmer wasn't necessarily in the premiership for a lot of these. Can't really hold him to account. You can hold him for account, for his work at Director of District Prosecutions, where he helped a lot of grooming gang paedophiles get off with either light sentences or really nothing at all. You can help with hold him to account for the roles that he's played in the persecution of thought crimes, whilst, again, assaulters such as Mike Amesbury and paedophile rapists go free. People go to prison for social media posts like Lucy Connolly, Peter Lynch, Wayne O'Rourke. They go to prison for social media posts, but paedophiles and gang rapists are out free. Yeah, make it make sense. Where was the peace through strength on all of these things, I wonder?
Has the finest servicemen and women in the world. We're showing them the respect that they deserve by delivering the biggest armed forces pay rise in 20 years. And by pledging today that we will end the hollowing out of our armed forces. We'll build a fighting force that is more integrated, more ready, more lethal than ever, backed by a stronger strategic reserve, fully trained and ready to mobilise at any time.
Let's just hope, for the sake of this nation, that they are better than him. We talked about this last time, ladies and gentlemen, if you remember. And so when he's talking about the elite fighting force that is the UK military, I have no doubt we had some of the best military service personnel on the planet. Not doubting that whatsoever. I hope that they're certainly stronger than this, ladies and gentlemen. This display of sheer toxic masculinity and muscular strength you're going to see right now.
And just try and whack it. Yes, this is good. And again. That's it. And again. Try and breathe. Relax. That's it. Okay. And just try and whack it. Yes, this is good.
Tough talk, but when it comes down to it,
try and breathe. Relax. That's it. Okay.
I wouldn't be scared. I can't imagine the Kremlin is quaking in their boots. Kremlin are quaking in their boots right now. So we'll see where that goes, ladies and gentlemen. We'll see how close to the precipice we are. It is currently it's just gone into the early hours of the 5th of June at the moment. I haven't heard any updates on what's been going on yet. I just certainly hope that this in some way, somehow, actually brings us closer to a peace deal. Pardon me, and not further away. So now moving on to some more Welsh Government silliness. Welsh Government evil, even. So, something I wanted to bring to your attention first off. I covered before, I can't remember what MS or MP that it was, member of the Senate, what member it was. But they seem awfully concerned, more than anything, in Wales right now with the treatment of asylum seekers. And the only time that they will bring anything up with regards to things like accommodation or housing or even economically and stuff like that, healthcare, is for the benefit of asylum seekers and foreigners, right? So, for example, we have Senedd member Joyce Watson from Mid and West Wales, chair of cross-party groups on construction and human trafficking in the Welsh Parliament. She recently condemned, quote, old and run-down asylum seeker housing. The site in question is a former military camp. And the question remains, shouldn't our soldiers be of greater concern? But the biggest point is, when I show you this video, ladies and gentlemen, I want to give you this little bit of extra information. Penachley, the village in which the site is located, falls within Joyce's constituency. She has been a member of Senedd for 18 years. During that time, she's mentioned this town, or this village, in the Senedd, in the chamber, just once. Just once. It is this time. So, not to defend local people, call for better services for facilities, teeth in, facilities for servicemen, but the housing of asylum seekers. Strange priorities indeed, ladies and gentlemen. These aging, short-haired liberal women. But this is where we're at, ladies and gentlemen. Nothing matters to these people unless it concerns the voter base that they are caring about appeasing and appealing to, which is not the Welsh voter base. It's the foreign voter base.
That around 200 asylum seekers would be housed at the Penally former military camp near Tenby. It now houses around 250 men. It should go without saying that a military camp is never a suitable place to house people who have fled oppression and war, who've experienced unimaginable hardship and trauma, and been separated from their families, and especially not an old and run-down one like Penally. I know it's so because my father used to train recruits there when he was the staff sergeant.
He's rolling in his fucking grave.
And by all accounts, the conditions there are now appalling. It jeopardises the men's physical and mental health and their dignity
God forbid.
as human beings. And yet the Home Office has repeatedly failed to address the poor living conditions at Penally. I'm afraid it's a case of out of sight and out of mind, and it's part of the Home Secretary's wider hostile environments policy that's being used to persecute vulnerable new arrivals to Britain.
So vulnerable. So vulnerable. These people that are they're so vulnerable and being persecuted so much. I hope you could hear that in the background, ladies and gentlemen. Do you mind, dog? You know what? I'm keeping this in. I'm keeping this in. This is this is truly an apt time my dog has decided to play with the squeaky toy. I love this. It's 12:30 in the morning. It's 12:30 on a Thursday morning, and my dog thinks it's playtime. Fantastic. Anyway, I completely lost my train of thought, ladies and gentlemen, because I was about to start speaking, and the dog decided to start chewing down on a chewy chicken again. So, anyway, point being, these people that drop their documentation in the channel that never bring anything across, pretty much, except military-age men. So if anything, the military-age men are fleeing the conflict and leaving the women and children to fight it. Tells you a lot about their character. Should we really be taking them in? But yeah, they're so persecuted. They're so persecuted for example, again, in Syria, the fall of the Assad regime, but yet they're still persecuted refugees that have nowhere to go. Sorry, I thought the whole point of the Bashar al-Assad regime falling was to allow these people to go back and enjoy the new Islamic prosperity that was supposed to be created, but yet they're still here. But again, point being, 18 years in the Senate, the only time that she's bringing it up is when her real constituents are seemingly going to benefit from it at Welsh taxpayer expense, never at the expense of their own and never at the expense of their own personal pay pockets, their pay packets. No, it's going to be the Welsh working class, the Welsh middle class that foot the bill for these people that have no business being here anyway. But of course, Joyce got to get her constituents what they want. She got to get her constituents what they want. Another thing that's really scary about what's going on in Wales at the moment is Labour backing the unions teaching your children. So the, quote, Unions and the World of Work pilot involves lessons, quote, delivered by trade union representatives invited into schools. The TUC, whose members include Labour backing unions, has received taxpayer money. A written question reveals that the resources for this project alone will cost at least £20,000. That's on top of £1.5 million directly going into the TUC, who deliver the sessions. The Labour wants to further expand the lessons into primary schools. So when we tell you then that the left-wing indoctrination is setting in deep, they're saying they want to bring this stuff, the Labour, the left, the unions, Labour, the left-wing economic system, and they want to indoctrinate children into believing that these things are all good, completely benevolent, by the fact we've seen how many of the unions have become ideologically driven on things like the trans agenda and stuff like that. Unison, for example, one of the largest unions, I guess the largest union in the country. Honestly, really, really bad ideological corruption. But of course, they want these people teaching your children. They want another avenue into your children. So again, if you're a parent and your child is in public school, which odds are in Wales, if you're in Wales, they are, especially if you live in an area like mine where you don't really have any other recourse, where homeschooling is often not possible and private education is a financial fever dream. You need to be aware of this. You need to be aware of this, that your child is being indoctrinated, not educated, and you need to be able to correct the record. If you can't right now, then you really need to start. You really need to start. Shit. Sorry guys, give me 2 seconds. There we are.
The Unions and the World of Work project has been developed in social partnership with trade unions, teachers and schools. Working with Wales TUC, the project will support delivery of careers and work-related experiences, CWRE, an integral part of the new curriculum for Wales. The unions and the world of work.
I told you, liberal women will be the downfall of this country. Make no mistake about it. It's political indoctrination. And it's not going to stop. It's going to get worse and worse and worse. It's going to get worse and worse and worse. You're expecting your kids to be coming home even further programmed into left-wing orthodoxy in the near future, unless you're going to be paying attention, ladies and gentlemen. And one final thing on this story, not particularly this story, but a story we covered before. We covered before the Welsh Government's sewage regulator was paying £134,000 taxpayer money to two positions to do with DEI, to do with diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? So we had, I think it was about nearly £72,000 for a grade 7 position, and then about £65,000 a year for a grade 6 position, just for basically telling white people, white men in particular, that they're evil oppressors in all instances, and they might as well just kill themselves, basically. Or they should, bow down and kiss the feet of the diverse peoples and such, and give away all their positions of quote unquote power and oppression. I'd love to give away my position of quote unquote privilege and power as a person that's barely making ends meet right now, working 2 jobs and trying to get this podcast off the ground to, just even have any semblance of having a family and a future that we can look forward to. Okay. I'd love to trade my position of privilege with the position of privilege at the person with the 70 grand a year coming in for just being able to tell people that they're evil oppressors and really probably not do much and go give a couple of speeches and stuff like that. Would love it. No, I wouldn't. I would hate it because I have this awful thing called principles, and they always get in the way. They always get in the way. But I wouldn't have it any other way. Yesterday, we revealed that natural resource wells. Yesterday, by the way, guys, referring to May 31st. So this is from June the 1st. Welsh Government's failed sewage regulator splashed out over £134,000 on diversity, equity and inclusion officers. We really need to stop using the equality tagline because it really doesn't mean what people think it means. Now we reveal another scandal. Payments to the discredited extreme organisation Stonewall, one of the most pro LGBT, trans the kids, attack the kids with all the sexual propaganda organisations in the world, right? Stonewall, extremely ideologically bent and wants to do a lot of awful things. But yeah, it's one of the most pro-LGBTQ plus really to the far side of that, to the communist, to the Marxist end of forcing it on everybody, not just like the live and let live types, no, affirm us or die kind of types. Then Natural Resources Wales confirmed to us that they made payments totaling £12,650 to Stonewall for membership of its diversity champion scheme, because of course they did. First and foremost, we say these payments are inappropriate. National Resources Wales is an environmental regulator. Stonewall's activities in any cases fall clearly outside its remit. Followers don't care about diversity within the Welsh regulator. They want to see an end to sewage discharges into Welsh rivers. And go to take into account again, diversity, equity, inclusion relies on putting people who are not qualified for the job, not certified and not competent at the job, in at the job for reasons that they have been persecuted in the past allegedly, and they have a certain skin color or they have a certain protected characteristic under the Stupid Equality Act. Okay, so it's literally taking qualified people out of roles and putting unqualified people in. That is what in order to have a more representative board or representative works. That was literally like saying, right, we have however many people in this community, so apparently every single thing needs to reflect that. So if you have an environment which is 25% Chinese, 25% let's say it's split exactly 50-50 male and female, let's just say that, then you have 25% white British, then you have 25% black, and you have 25% some other thing. I don't care. It's really, really late and I got to go to bed because I'm back in work early this morning. So then the workforce, every single work position, every single school position, every single whatever, all your school faculties, all of your workforce has to be exactly 25% of those things, and it has to be exactly split 50-50 between male and female. Now, obviously, in order to make this happen, you have to discriminate against competence, because odds are there's going to be some people who are more competent for the job that are going to fall outside of certain ethnic categories, particularly if you have more people. So, for example, if all of a sudden you have, again, this is being shoehorned into areas where it can be as little as 20% or 10% non-white British, okay? But for some reason, then having to have over-representation of people that fall within the BAME stuff. So now you're directly discriminating against the group where you're likely going to get most of your competent people from just by sheer number of them. And therefore, you're putting somebody in that's very likely not going to be competent because you're shoehorning in all of these other arbitrary measures. So that's what DEI is. And they're spending this to the tune of nearly £13,000. Cash and resources spent on this. It's little wonder Wales is the worst part of Britain for sewage. And there are the fruits of this labour. There are the fruits of this labour, that Wales is one of the worst. We covered before, that these guys uncovered, that 25% of the most polluted rivers are in Wales. 25% of the top 20 polluted rivers are in Wales. So that's 5 rivers all in all. Yeah, 25%, 5 rivers. Yeah, that's it. We don't, and they're right in saying we don't care about diversity. We care about these rivers being cleaned up. We care about the quality of our water being as it should be for our health and for our life to continue. Stonewall's activities are very sinister. It refuses to accept the biological reality that a woman is an adult human female, or as I talked about in the last episode, a human that is ordered towards the gestation of humans. It instead espouses a radical, hardline, dogmatic ideology. So and they say that then the NRW must stop funding Stonewall and focus on its day job. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, completely agree. But it tells you again how ideologically corrupted these places already are, that DEI and these left-wing initiatives are being shoehorned in waste management in rivers and in the environment. Imagine how many other sectors that this is facing. Imagine Welsh Water, for example, is going through this, and then you question a lot of people, for example, why the water coming through a lot of their pipes is not as good, why they're trying to obfuscate that with then Lewis Brackpool, for example, asking freedom of information requested for water clarity in Britain and stuff like that, and they're trying to fob him off and trying not to release that information. But again, these are the people, ladies and gentlemen, that the NRW, Natural Resources Wales, are paying this money to, and this is where we're going to leave it for today. So this is, again, June 1st, West Hollywood Pride Parade, and you have men wearing Speedos dancing in front of children in the audience. This should just make you very, very sad, very, very concerned, and very, very angry, ladies and gentlemen. Again, if you're wondering why I call this month, when we're meant to be calling it Pride Month, I call it Sodom and Gomorrah Awareness Month, this is why. Right. I'm going to turn that down. Let's turn that down. This is a horrifying sight, in case you're wondering, ladies and gentlemen. They're bumping and gyrating and are wearing thongs in front of children. I'm not going to subject you to any more of that. This is the kind of stuff that Stonewall backs, right? This is men and women in quite clearly provocative outfits, doing very provocative dances and stuff like that, in front of, you can just about see them in the background of this video, for example, right at the start, I believe, there's children in this audience, because there you go. So there's a child right at the end there in the audience. They should not be exposed to this stuff. And I'm wondering, people taking photographs like that, why do you want these photographs? Why do you want them? Obviously, we know why. But again, these are the kind of people that we're talking about. These kind of people that talk about. These are the kind of people that Stonewall looks at and goes, yes, we need them in the schools. We need them in natural resources. We need them in all of these other things. You know? And then you wonder why you end up with all of these horrific outcomes, such as, for example, not directly related, but Mr. Colin Maguire. So we're going to leave it for today. Colin Maguire, ladies and gentlemen, is a quote-unquote non-binary, pansexual, LGBTQ, NMNOP activist. And nappy-wearing child predator who got stung by Alex Rosen. Alex Rosen goes by the X handle I Fight for Kids. And he's a prominent pedophile hunter in America. Does stings all up and down the country. Michael Knowles fairly recently had a conversation with him about some of the stings that he's done. He's uncovered some really, really horrifying stuff. Basically, kind of a modern-day Chris Hansen, in a way. Colin went to meet an 11-year-old girl and her mother. He then pissed and shit in his adult nappy in front of this mother and her 11-year-old. Obviously, the 11-year-old whom he wanted to have sexual relations with. These are the kind of people that we are supposed to celebrate under Pride. This is what we're supposed to celebrate under Pride. So here's the clip of this. What was it? Non-binary, quote unquote. This is basically the hero of the Lib Dems. This is basically the Lib Dems hero you're going to be watching right now, ladies and gentlemen.
Okay. This is stand up. This is Colin McGuire. He's from Bloomington, Illinois, currently under investigation for child pornography right now. Hit with a shit diaper. Officers are going to have to get some overtime.
Oh God, you don't need to see that. Oh, I'm sorry for subjecting you to this, ladies and gentlemen. I think this might get taken down off YouTube.
Please give these officers a raise. West Frankfurt, please. Holy shit. Literally.
I cannot fit into this. It's physically too small.
Put your pants. Are there your pants? Put your pants on.
You got something from
Put your pants on. Let me see what it says.
He came here to meet an 11-year-old girl for free.
Put your pants on.
I'm having a fucking emotional breakdown,
You
please.
know what? You're going to get cuffed and you're going to walk out without pants.
I never wanted to be this way.
Okay. Put your pants on.
He seems sane. Jesus Christ.
Look at
Grab
the
those
diaper.
pants and put them on right now.
Look at the diaper.
Oh God.
Put them on.
I'm going
Leave
to.
the diaper alone. Put your pants on.
Oh, the poor couch, the poor settee.
I didn't want to.
Put your pants on.
I didn't want.
I don't care what you want. Put your pants on. Put 'em on.
There you go. He realizes it's over.
You guys are fucking sick for.
You know what's sick? Trying to solicit a minor for sex.
Purposely shitting.
Fact check true. I'll do. Oh, I can't deal with any more of that. I don't even think I'm going to be able to show that. You might have seen this, ladies and gentlemen. You might have not. Just in case I did have to cut that bit out. So let me show you this, ladies and gentlemen. In case I have to cut that bit out. This is a photo of the gentleman from Alex Rosen's X page. This is a photo that I will show. Honestly. Colin McGuire came to meet who he believed to be an 11-year-old and her mother. Not even 10 minutes into the meeting, he took a shit and piss in front of them. But hey, guys. Happy Pride, right? Happy Pride. So, just so you know, here's a little bit of extra information for you, ladies and gentlemen, that Alex shared. I believe this is some kind of police report. So this was the 31st of May. And you can see here it says Colin Patrick McGuire. And this is his inmate information by the looks. But it looks like he's been taken in, has actually been charged, and likely he's been given an inmate number. Likely been convicted. Seems to be. Solicitation to meet a child. Indecent solicitation of a child. Ugh. And that was only because he got caught with a sting. If it hadn't been a sting, then God knows what he would have done. But again, Here we are, ladies and gentlemen. Happy Pride. Happy Pride. Make sure you use the correct pronouns. Make sure you don't misgender this man. Okay. Oh, sorry. This they them, this non-binary thing. And again, this gives you an extra thing if you're a parent, especially. Make sure you keep an eye on who they're communicating with online, because you'd be surprised the lengths that Alex has had to go through in order to do these things. Because a lot of the time, he's the one being arrested, believe it or not. So his photo, for example, that's his cover photo on his X page is literally this, where he's being arrested. A lot of the times, especially in these more liberal areas, and you've got to take into account everywhere in this country right now is basically a liberal area with liberal governance pretty much everywhere. Because a lot of the a lot of the conservatives, quote unquote, are liberals in sheep's clothing, liberals in conservatives' clothing. And we've had a liberal government really ever since 1997. They will more often than not go after the people that try to bring this to light and try to warn people about this, rather than the people that actually put children in danger. So many instances where Alex has been arrested by police for doing these things, and nothing really has been done about the persecutors themselves. So yeah, really not good. Really not good, obviously. But yeah, I'll try and keep that in if I can. I'll try to keep the video in if I can. I might have to blur it or take it out. We will see. But yeah, Colin Maguire, great subject for the day's cancellation, especially given that he will no doubt be the hero of Ed Davey and the Lib Dems. Because I'll just refresh your memory on what they said, ladies and gentlemen. They wanted to revise the Equality Act to protect trans plus and disabled rights, protect bodily and medical autonomy for all, recognize non-binary, agender and intersex folks, codify trans meanings of man and women, want to chemically castrate kids but not chemically castrate sex offenders, and protect LGBTQ plus expression in all areas of life, and do even the furthest left that is there to go on the left with regards to this issue. Truly another level of radical. All right, that'll do it for today, ladies and gentlemen. Hope you found this episode useful, highlighting a lot of the things that are going on in the political system in Wales, England, and all up and down the country, and obviously across the other side of the world as well. Thank you very much for watching, ladies and gentlemen. Have a good morning, afternoon, good evening, good night, wherever you are. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you for watching. Hwyl fawr, and we'll see you again very, very soon. Godspeed.